Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Colleen Meyer with Meyer Mints LLC, bringing you Fearless in Pink. And we have an amazing guest today. Her name is Kristin Downing, and she is a cultural anthropologist. Kristin, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's degree from Cal State Long Beach in 2017 in cultural anthropology. I am currently working on my master's in cultural anthropology and working on my thesis as we speak.
So, can you tell our audience what is a cultural anthropologist?
Yeah, so anthropology is essentially the study of man, and cultural anthropology is just a subset of that. And that's focusing on culture, being how man is existing in itself today, its ideals, its values, all of that is, cultural anthropology.
Okay, and so let's talk about your master's thesis. I find your master's thesis fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about what your master's thesis is?
Yeah, my master's thesis is on the cultural shift towards body positivity in social media and marketing. So, really focusing on this increase in body positivity that we're seeing, not just across social media, but also across the marketing that happens within social media.
So, it's basically how it's body image, body shaming, that that type of telling women and girls and men too. I know your studies on women, but it can happen to men too. How society dictates to us how we should feel about our body and our weight. Is that correct?
Right. So our culture has a preconceived notion of what the ideal is. And what the body positivity movement is doing is it's trying to shift away from this ideal into a more accepting version of what natural bodies look like in an attempt to kind of alleviate some of the pressure that a lot of women are feeling to fit that ideal.
Yeah, and like we were talking, it's not just women, but it's young girls, and it can get into even under the age of 10. W- You correct me if I'm wrong. That through media, we're telling them you have to look like this, and then people are trying to conform to that. And so, tell me a little bit about um, what you're learning in your study. What are you finding in your study?
So, what I'm finding in my study is that a lot of women are being presented with images, and they're being presented with these images that are the ideal. And it starts starting at a very young age, especially with the newest generations, because they're consuming social media in ways that other generations either didn't have access to or wasn't quite as immediately accessible as it is now. So kind of really talking about what is a diet. And a lot of what my um, data is on is asking women, what is their definition of diet? How do they perceive diet? Do they feel shame when they look at their body? Do they feel a pressure to change that body? Are they comparing themselves to the images that they see, as well as presenting women with images from marketing that I've seen across social media, both with a more standardized version of a body as opposed to like the cultural ideal version of a body, and asking them their opinions on the product and the advertisement and what they're seeing when they're looking at these women's bodies.
Can you share a little bit? I know you're still working on, wrapping up your thesis. Can you share a little bit about kind of like a synopsis, have you, about, what kind of feel you're getting from these women about their body in our diet culture and here in the United States?
Yeah, so it might not come to a shock to many, but most of my participants feel very bad about their body. Even if they would say I'm average size, they're still comparing. The comparison, every single participant said that they find themselves comparing themselves to other women's bodies. So that's just massively prevalent in my data. I'm also seeing that a lot of women are trying to distinguish between the diet that we know as far as supplements and the way that, the things that we take to lose weight, as opposed to what we're eating. So there's kind of this divulgence between, well, you say diet, but I'm not trying to lose weight, I'm trying to get healthy. And so we're seeing a shift in the language that we're using, um, to kind of take away from the negative, but I'm trying to see if there's actually, is that negative going away or is it shape shifting?
Mhm. Now you and I've had this conversation before about women's body types. Just because you're skinny doesn't mean that you're healthy.
Mhm.
And just because you are heavier doesn't mean you're unhealthy. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So we're very visual. And so our culture seems to make this assumption on a person's health based on the way that they look. There is a movement that is occurring called Health at Every Size, and it is an organization behind the movement. And, it's really taking a look at the health of a person regardless of their size, whether you are overweight and working with your physician to get in a healthier state and that's your goal, then that's fine. We're going to focus on your health at every size. To being a bodybuilder and, being a fitness guru and, that kind of healthy. And it's really about health at every size and not so much about assuming what's going on the inside of a person just by looking at their outside.
Yeah, Kirsten, I appreciate that you're saying that, because it's not about, because like if we had a medical doctor on here, they would say, if someone's heavier, they're unhealthy. But that's not what we're talking here. What we're talking about accepting where you are at. And if you're saying I'm at this size and I'm trying to get healthier, then that's okay too. Because you can be skinny or thin and still not be healthy and be still saying, I'm trying to eat to be healthier. It can go on either side of the spectrum, right?
Absolutely. You can look at a person who on the outside might fit aesthetically our cultural ideal, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that person doesn't struggle with anything, a disease that makes it hard for them to gain weight, or maybe they just don't eat right, or any multitude of things. You really honestly do not know what's going on inside the body of a person. Whereas there are people who say, might be a size 14 or a size 16 that work out every day and they eat healthy. And that's just the way that their body looks. And, but we have a negative association with this person on their weight as opposed to this person. But you really truly have no idea what's going on.
So let's talk about body imaging and being that perfect body and having that perfect body. Who determines that in our culture? Because if you look at history, in the Renaissance period, women that were more full figured were considered, that's the ideal women. The 60s, it was skinny with Twiggy. We're kind of still in that a little bit with the real, we're obsessed with thinness. But who sets those standards?
In our culture, it's the patriarchy, it's the male gaze. Women want to be perceived as sexy, they want to be perceived as desirable. And when you have societies that are predominantly male ran or patriarchal system, oftentimes the men and their gaze is what sets the standard for being sexy. So and back in this times, a man loved a voluptuous woman, so that is more of the cultural accepted look. Whereas today, men have a certain particular style that they choose to like view as opposed to the other. And so that really sets the standard. And then when you have people in the industries, in marketing and in Hollywood, who are presenting women who fit that male gaze.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, um, that's what's creating, and in many times, like I grew up in the time of the Barbie doll, and if Barbie was a person and you took those same measurements, there's that person could not exist with those measurements, with the waist being that tiny, right?
Right.
So when people from my generation are striving to be Barbie, you're already setting me up to fail in my expectations of myself. So let's talk about, so that was when I was a child. Let's talk about children today. What would you tell parents with children, tweens and younger, even, and even teenagers, what what can they do to help their children past that body imaging type of profiling?
Part of anthropology is we take a look at language. The fun thing about anthropology is we look at life as holistically. So not everything is black and white. And part of that is language. Visually, they're seeing these images, but also we need to focus on our language, what you're saying to your child, not commenting negatively about their appearance, making sure that you're giving them positive reinforcement, telling them things that they should love about themselves and encouraging them to love things about themselves. It really starts with the words that we're using with our children. And especially with the Barbie situation, that's one of the first things we learn when we're handed this image as a child. And you diversify the things that your child is looking at on social. If your child has a social, diversify the images that they're being presented with in their toys. There's all kinds of things that you can bring to them to say, this is not necessarily the normal. It's just a cultural standard. So you can start them off young as far as what their expectations are.
So let's talk about something that I noticed. Women can be worse on women than men can be on women. Some women can be vicious. If you see a talk show and this person's on there, I'm losing weight, I'm dieting, or they'll say, I love myself. This is me. And I'm a, super skinny or super big or whatever, or somewhere in between. And I love myself. They clap. But then you got somebody on social media, whether it's a regular person, a singer, an actor, actress, and there's a picture of them that's not as flattering. It's like a piranha. It's almost heartless in a lot of ways, where they go after them about their weight. And what do you, as a culture anthropologist, think about that phenomena?
Well, I think that women kind of dragging other women down supports the patriarchy and supports the male gaze. It works in their favor. If women are working against each other to support these cultural norms, then we're not going to see change. When women start supporting each other and start understanding each other, that's when we'll start to really see change. But as long as we tear each other down to support this cultural ideal, to support the male gaze, we're not going to get anywhere. And in anthropology, we talk a lot about social norms. And anytime anyone steps outside of a social norm, they become a pariah. So, there's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to shame anybody not fitting the social norm. So people on social media that don't fit the social norm, unfortunately, they get a large brunt of that hate, which is just really unnecessary. But if we learn to support each other, then we can really kind of break down these barriers and start to move forward and change our culture and our culture's view on women and their bodies.
Now let's talk about the diet culture and social media. What do you think could help pull away from that? What do you think we could do a little bit different, as getting out there? Okay, so because there's marketers and there's people out there, Hollywood, but then there's a lot of just regular people too. What can we do as regular people to counterbalance that? And where do you think change needs to be?
So I think change starts in representation, representation of different body styles, people with different abilities, things of those natures. They need to be presented in our marketing. And I think that us women, we need to start focusing our energies on supporting brands that have diversity, supporting brands that have representation. Because once you start kind of using your wallet to make social change, that's when you're going to see a difference. If this brand is absolutely refusing to have representation, then don't support them. And then eventually these things will start to change. And you have brands that are using representation, support them. And then we can start seeing more of this and then less of this.
And I agree. And I think that's a great thing that you just said was, we have to vote with our wallet, right? We only support companies that are that show women in of a variety of sizes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could give one label to your study or one label to what's going on with body shaming, what would it be? What would the one label be?
One label.
So if you say body shaming, a is it more of a social thing, or is it more of a marketing thing? Do you see what I'm saying? Where does that separate? Is it is it because we see the women on TV and we want to be beautiful like them,
Mhm.
or is it a social thing where, the way we were raised, women, we like my podcast, the reason it's Fearless and Pink is because who says we have to be more, who says we have to be male to be powerful, right? So if you had to give it kind of a label or a title, what would it be?
Uh, I mean, I guess I would say it was social. I think the beauty of anthropology is that you very rarely ever see an anthropologist put a label on anything, because we do have a tendency to view things holistically, and everything has something in the pot. But it is social. Now, whether that social means what we're seeing in our marketing or the way that we perceive and speak to one another, it all works together. It all works together to create a problem. It'll all work together to solve a problem.
Do you see any changes coming in the next, let's say, 10 years with this topic, or do you see it kind of sailing that same ship, going the same direction, or do you see some kind of shifting to a more diverse female body imaging?
I definitely see it getting better. There is a counter shift. People are, like you said earlier, tearing each other down. They're fighting it. But it doesn't appear to be stopping the companies that are doing it. And that is so essential. They are continuing to push forward. And I think that that gives me hope, because if we don't see the end of it, if it doesn't go away, then that leaves the opportunity for there to be more and for it to be better. So I'm hoping within the next 10 years, instead of seeing an image of a woman that is different than yourself, won't have this knee jerk reaction of negative, but it will become the norm and people won't have such adverse like reactions to it. So in 10 years, I'm hoping it looks like it will get better. So we'll see.
I like what you just said, because we should be able to look at a woman, another woman, and say, she's beautiful in her way and I'm beautiful in my way, and that's okay on either
Mhm.
way. And to be supportive, and when I see a woman that's beautiful, I'm like, look at her, she's gorgeous, good for her, rather than trying to either tear myself down or tear her down. And I think that goes to back to just self love.
Yeah, and you should love yourself no matter what. And by all means, I feel like sometimes when we have these types of conversations, people that might be in the fitness or enjoy being, a smaller size, take it as a personal attack on them. But absolutely not. You should love yourself whether you fit the culture norm or not.
That's
The
right.
problem is the culture norm, this perceived notion of how women need to be one way, but we need to embrace them from here to them all the way over there. We need to just love ourselves regardless.
I love that, Kristen. Thank you so much, because I know a lot of people think we're giving, we're not saying this one's better or that one's better. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the social norm and what's being sold to us as the ideal woman. And I appreciate that. Well, Kristen, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on. You are Fearless in Pink, and we'll have you on again talking about some other cultural issues that are coming up, or that are happening in our society. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.